first revolution is when you change your mind about how you look at things and see that there might be another way to look at it that you have not been shown.
Peace and blessings, everyone. Welcome to the Right Authority Podcast. I am your host, Carlos Carr Sr., also known as the KCOG. Why am I here? I am building an intelligent agenda to empower African and indigenous people living in the United States of America toward political control and freedom of their communities. In short, or the purpose, dismantle white supremacy. If you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything and anything else you understand will only confuse you. That is a quote from Neely Fuller Jr. And we're going to kick things off with a little refresher. One of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my website here in just a moment. So y'all just stay with me while I get ready to pull that up. Thank you very much. Just let me do a quick share. And just a slight adjustment here. I'm going to bring myself over to this side. And hopefully you guys are seeing the website there. I'm just going to run through it real quick so it won't take long. Again, the website is www.the-right-authority, right, the opposite of left, authority.com. And since I'm coming back with my current series that I've been working on, which is Hacking America's Mind, you have to have some information as to where all this is coming from. So I'm taking you to the site to on purpose to show you where you can get the information and you can get caught up on it, okay? We're going to start with actually, I did this in the wrong order. The last program I did here was the Hacking of American Mind. And then there was part 2, so I guess I'm working on part 3 right now. But in those, you have to go back and check and get caught up on where this is coming from. And the first one, what I did was take a look at Trump's 2020 run, QAnon, and the evangelical right. And Professor Joel Dimsdale, the author of a book, Understanding Brainwashing, From Pavlov to Social Media, was my main focus guest and video that I featured in that particular program. Now, excuse me. What's important here is that, and here's part 2 before I switch over to the other side. Here I take a look at social media, and we focus on QAnon, social media, and the evangelical right. And there's some interesting things there because what you have to understand that these people believe things that are not traditional, and they have some truth, but a lot of misinformation, if you understand what I'm saying. So rather than to seek out the difference between the truth and misinformation, they just follow it straight through. And we have something called QAnon that these people were getting their information from. So you can go back and start there, and then you can get an idea as I'm building this, where I'm going with this hopefully final piece of Hacking the American Mind part 3. Now, my podcast, you can go back and you can look at Brainwashing Explained, and I go into the full video with Joe Dimsdale as he breaks down that whole thing and how it was developed. On this video, How to Brainwash a Nation in 4 Steps. And then this is from Yuri Bezmenov, the Russian or USR agent that defected and came to the United States in the 1970s. This guy was interviewed in 1985. And he broke down what they really do in the KBG to destabilize countries. And his point is they use a 4-step process. And then that very first video there with the blue brain explains that process. Next, I break down each of those 4 steps, starting with step 1, demoralization, and then come up to step 2, destabilization, and then I wrap it up with crisis and normalization, which is step 3 and 4. Now, to back that up, what I did is I came back and went to Brainwashing Explained, so that you guys think I'm not off of my rocker here, and gave you some background and history on brainwashing from an expert. So I know some of this stuff is really hard for you guys to really understand, but if you go in, take a look or listen, because some of this I had to do on video just to show you where this information was coming from. Just basically just give you the resources where to find this, and it's just easier to show it in a visual format, if you understand what I mean. So that is getting you caught up on that. So I suggest that you start there if you come in on this video and you're saying, what the heck? Well, you got to go back and get that information in order to understand where I'm at now and the focus of where I'm at now, which brings me to recap, and I pretty much already done that with the recap. The one thing I didn't, well, let me go back and just point this out real quick. As I was talking about how QAnon came into existence and how it grew with Trump supporters and Trump himself, believe it or not. I also, in the midst of that, showed you where the critical race theory misinformation got into the public conversation by Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene. I also will now show you how critical race theory was spread to every school board and every state house in America. It's called ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. And I'm going to let Brother Greg Carr jump in here and break this down for you.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that think the United States of America is a nation too. That's another myth. But I mean, let's get back to the topic. I got a chance to read the lawsuit that was filed by the NAACP of Florida, Disability Rights Florida, and Common Cause versus the Secretary of State there, Lee. And of course, they're claiming that these new laws will violate Title II of the American Disability Act, Section 1983 and 88 of the Federal Code, Voting Rights Act, Section 2. And that's going to be heard by a Court of Appeals, Northern District of Florida. Ultimately, that'll be appealed to the 11th Circuit. That's one of the many circuits that the Trump administration with the White Nationalist Party was able to flip. And if you read Justice Clarence Thomas's recent dissent in a voting rights case, you know that some of the gaslighting that we just heard found its way into Justice Thomas's dissent. That brings me to the point. Back in December, the American Legislative Executive Council, ALEC rather, met, and they had a voter integrity working group. So these bills that we're seeing in Georgia and Florida and Texas, these are not individual pieces. They come of a larger piece with an eye toward one objective, and that is to retake the federal legislature and to retake the White House. And let's be very clear. When we start talking about facts and arguing with these folks, we're not on the same page, because this isn't about facts. This isn't about making points, because there is no common identity. The white nationalists that met with ALEC included Hans Spakowski, who of course we know is a chief architect of this rather ridiculous stuff. Several of the folks who were on Trump's quote-unquote voter integrity commission that fell apart, that was led, if you remember, by the flop sweat brother of the corn-pone governor of Florida, and that would be Chris Kobach, who's right now running for Secretary of State in Kansas and will lose that election as well. But the whole point is to continue gaslight, to continue propagandize, and to shrink the electorate to the point where they can steal elections. Finally, I'll say this. I wish them the best of luck, because I see what people don't seem to understand is you might steal an election, but what you won't then do is get rid of all the people whose vote you stole. This country's going to come apart, and I just hope our young brother, who I'm very glad to see,
We're going to stop it right there. But you get an idea of what ALEC is about, and check this out. Here's their website, and you can see, well, if you probably can't see it, but it's actually ALEC, ALEC.org. You can go in there, you can check it all out and see that the website is legit. And they already put up their talking points or agenda for 2022. You can go in and check that out. But this is critical information. Y'all got to understand how this game is really being played. And very few people talk about the American Legislative Exchange Council. That is not in the public conversation very often. So a lot of people do not know how they spread this misinformation and get the same type of laws passed from state to state. They did the same with stand your ground laws that they got passed from state to state. A lot of the gun laws, this is how they got them going from state to state. The whole thing on affirmative action was put out by ALEC and went from state to state. That's when I was first introduced to it. When that whole conversation came up, I can't remember exactly when, but I think it was in maybe the early 2000s, somewhere in there. I think either prior to Obama or right after Obama came into office. So this is information we need to have in order to understand how our government works. okay? Especially now. So I'm going to go ahead and move on from here. Okay, just to finish the recap from the last show, I also showed you the interview with Jason Stanley, author of How Racism Works. He was interviewed by Michelle Martin, who did an excellent job with this interview because she really got into the interview. I'm serious. You need to check that piece out. On the topic of America is now in fascism's legal phase. I want to make sure you understand that title. America is now in fascism's legal phase. That means they're setting it up legally. They get in the courts and everything else. That's what all this back and forth is about the Supreme Court and all this old junk. They're setting this thing up, guys. So you just got to follow me on this information. Mr. Stanley wrote a book called How Fascism Works. And when that same author starts to put out a call that we're now in fascism's legal phase, I consider that expert testimony, and I'm going to listen to that. Now, the rest of you may choose not to. And to wrap up last week, the last thing I showed you was the Knights of the Golden Circle and how this secret organization backed the Confederacy from the start. To secede from the Union, everything. They even, once the Confederacy did secede, they also supplied the men and armaments for the war. It is called the Knights of the Golden Circle. Now, what is interesting about this secret society, their entire plan was to secede from the United States with all the slave states and then create a golden circle starting off the tip of Florida with the entire Caribbean, including Cuba. In fact, they wanted Havana as their capital city. They wanted all the Caribbean islands all the way down to the northern part of South America, and it did include Guyana and Tobago and some other thing, Aruba, everything that's in that, and then comes back around to the Jamaica, Haiti, includes all that, all the Puerto Rico, all that. It included all that, and then comes back around to Central America and links up through Central America, the state of Mexico, and then back into Texas. That was their golden circle. Please, y'all, look this information up because they were a secret organization that acted in very similar ways to the Masons as far as their symbolisms, their handshakes, and the way they set up their meetings in secret. So that is something worthy of checking out. Now, that's 20 minutes into the show. Let's get this thing rolling, man. Tonight, so that, and I do that to keep people abreast with where I'm going, because if you did not understand the prior information, this is going to sound extremely strange to you. So, but what we're going to look at now, tonight, is marketing, and where I got the original idea for the title of this series, but it's a little different. It is Hacking of the American Mind with Dr. Robert Lustig, best-selling author, at the University of California, San Francisco. He is an endocrinologist. If you have diabetes, that's who you're seeing as a doctor, especially if you're in advanced diabetes. He explores how industry has contributed to a culture of addiction, depression, and chronic disease. I call it dis-ease, but it's disease. Dr. Lustig is interviewed by Asheley Mason on September 6, 2017. We're going to go ahead and let me get that set up for you first of all, because you know how it is. Just give me a second. It won't take.
Find that.
So it's a malevolence.
We're going to start
in
it
an
there.
attempt to basically blackmail or to cause the crashing of a computer.
He's explaining hacking right
wipe
now.
out a hard drive. So clearly not something good. And the question is, how can your brain be hacked? And the answer is, well, it doesn't get hacked with computer code, but it gets hacked with false information. And in fact, we've had false information since the time of the Romans. It's called propaganda. So what's the difference between marketing, which is what companies say they do, and propaganda? And the answer is the truth. That's the difference. When companies express a point of view that furthers their goals, then that point of view references true facts. That's called marketing. When a company expresses a point of view and tries to advance its goals based on misinformation, that's called propaganda. So the difference between marketing and propaganda is the truth.
Now, I'm pausing it here for a reason. Because before we go any farther, I want you to kind of see how they go about this whole business.
Edward Bernays persuaded women to smoke. He convinced the public that bacon and eggs were the true all-American breakfast. He also facilitated the successful overthrow of a democratically elected Guatemalan president. How did one man achieve these remarkable accomplishments? The methods he used to achieve these astonishing events are explained in his book, Propaganda. What is propaganda? Propaganda nowadays is seen as a synonym.
Now, the reason I interrupted right when he said the difference between marketing and propaganda is the truth, I want you to understand propaganda. And to do that, I'm bringing in the propaganda expert and creator, Edward Bernays. Now, Edward Bernays is the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and he's a close nephew, okay? Because he uses a lot of the theory of his uncle in order to create propaganda. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get into this because I want, and the whole public relation relation deal that he created and why it was created. Okay, remember, marketing is the truth. Everything else is propaganda. Okay. And that's why I'm interrupting it right here so that we can see and understand propaganda.
For lies. It implies half-truths, selective history, bias, misleading information and other tricks. However, it can be used in a positive manner. For example, a campaign to improve public health through vaccination. When used in such a constructive way, it can be a progressive force, capable of improving and benefiting every life and every home. Specific propaganda should be seen as good or bad depending on the merit of the cause urged and the correctness of the information published. Modern propaganda is a consistent and continuing effort to create or shape events to influence public relations on an enterprise, idea or group. Edward Bernays worked for the Woodrow Wilson administration in the First World War, using a propaganda model promoting America's war efforts as bringing democracy to Europe. After swaying the public across the world with this slogan, he set to work on employing propaganda in peacetime.
Now you know where that came from, bringing democracy. Every time the United States go into a war, they're bringing democracy.
Due to negative implications surrounding the word propaganda because of its use by the Germans in the war, he promoted the term public relations. Public relations expert is concerned with bringing an idea to the awareness of the public, using modern media communications and group formations of society. They act as an advisor to their clients. Edward Bernays had an impressive list of these clients, ranging from media companies such as Time Inc., CBS and NBC, through to individuals such as the President of the United States. He was not just a propagandist. He was concerned with courses of action, policies, systems and opinions, and the securing of public support for them.
Did y'all get that? Really, did y'all get that? I really need y'all to think for a moment. Okay? Just for a moment. Look at that list. First thing you have to ask is why would media giants like Time Inc., CBS, and NBC need public relations? Is it to get you to buy stuff? How about the President of the United States? Why does the President of the United States need public relations? Or propaganda? That means they're not being truthful. Not being truthful. Just think about it. One more time. Just think about it. Think.
His responsibilities even included discovering new markets. The most famous new market Bernays was asked to uncover was that of women smoking cigarettes in the late 1920s. Up until then, women smoking in public was seen as a social taboo. Bernays set about removing this taboo to potentially double tobacco companies' possible clientele. First, he contacted a psychoanalyst to understand the societal perceptions that dissuaded women from smoking. He found that for feminists, cigarettes were like torches of freedom that symbolised their non-conformity and freedom from male oppression. He used this information to formulate a strategy and got a group of stylish women to march in an Easter Day parade. Prior to the parade, he had told the press that a group of women's rights marchers would light torches of freedom. On his cue, the women lit up their cigarettes in front of the eager photographers. The result was press coverage in several major newspapers including the New York Times, which helped to break the taboo against women smoking in public. The study of mass psychology has brought to light the fact that a group can have certain mental characteristics distinct from that of an individual. Learning how the masses are influenced by various factors allows us to affect change in public opinion with a fair amount of accuracy. However, propaganda will never be an exact science, in the same way psychology or sociology isn't, because they deal with humans. If you can influence leaders, you automatically influence the groups they rule or have authority over. The group mind has impulses, emotions and habits, rather than thoughts as such. It makes up its mind by impulsively following the example of a trusted leader or authority figure. If this is not available, the herd thinks by cliches or images that stand for a group of experiences or ideas.
Now, you guys do understand he's talking about manufacturing consent at this point, rather than informed consent where they're telling you the truth about whatever is going on, use of tobacco. They manufacture your consent, okay? So that is very, very important. I wanted to make sure I pointed that out with what he's doing now, especially in the group dynamics, because in just a second, you're going to see the other way you're being influenced or brainwashed to follow certain ideals.
An old propagandist would treat the human mind as an individual machine and rely on certain stimulus, often repeated, creating a habit. Similarly, they would reiterate an idea to create conviction with individuals. For example, to advertise bacon and eggs, adverts would contain phrases along the lines of "Eat more eggs," "Bacon is good for you," and "Bacon and eggs are cheap and healthy." A new propagandist such as Bernays, who understands group psychology, would first look at who influences eating habits. The answer is doctors and physicians. They would then suggest to these doctors and physicians to publicly state that eating bacon and eggs is good for you.
Alrighty now I gotta throw another pause in for you, because did you just catch that? With bacon and eggs and how they got, and you'll hear the rest of the story in just a moment. But as you can see, they got doctors involved because there's a psychological trust between a doctor and a patient. So all they needed to hear was something from a doctor where people would trust it. Okay. And then they fall for the hook. They get caught. But before we go any farther on that, let me hit y'all with this for a minute again. See, and again, I got to get y'all to think. All right? Doctors. I'm going to interrupting the slide by interrupting another slide. And because I got to show you this, guys. You got to see how this whole thing pieced together. It ties together if you could just follow the dots and tie it together. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a little study here that a good friend of mine, I'm going to hide that for now, that a good friend of I did an interview with, I'm not going to call him a good friend, a gentleman I did an interview with brought out some very powerful information on doctors. And I never really looked at it this way until he hit me with it. And I want y'all to pay attention to some things here, okay? First thing I want you to pay attention to, I'm going to back this up and I'm going to show you what I was Googling. Now, hopefully y'all can see this. Y'all can see it just fine. Because you got to see this. Do you see in Google, I put in death by doctor term. Lateral genesis is what popped up. So I said, there is a term of death by doctor? You see it, guys? Lateral genesis, death by doctor. Now, check this. This is the mind blower right here. Really. Because I want you to look at this. And hopefully y'all seeing it just fine. I want y'all to look at this, but I want you to pay attention to the name. John Hopkins Medical. Studies suggest medical errors are now third leading cause of death in the United States. Yeah, I can't be making this stuff up. Analyzing medical death rates data over an 8-year period, Johns Hopkins patient safety experts have calculated that more than 250,000 deaths per year are due to medical error in the United States. Their figure, published May 3rd in the BMJ, surpasses the U.S. Center of Disease Control and Prevention's third leading cause of death, respiratory disease. Death by doctor is now the third leading cause of death in the United States, and this data was released on May 3rd, 2016. Real quick, the Johns Hopkins team says the CDC way of collecting national health statistics failed to classify medical errors separately on the death certificate. The researchers are advocating for updated criteria for classifying deaths on death certificates. Now, what is the reason for this? You come down a little farther and they tell you incident rates of death directly attributable to medical care gone awry haven't been recognized in any standardized method of collecting national statistics. And that's Martin McCary at Johns Hopkins University that's given that report. But look at the very next statement. The medical coding system was designed to maximize billing for physician services, not to collect national health statistics, as it is currently being used. Now, ain't that a kick in the head? But y'all, it get worse. I'm tying all this together so you guys can see this stuff, man. Y'all got to believe that this stuff didn't just materialize. Somebody brought all this madness into existence, and I'm getting ready to show you right now who did it. I called him, or I will call him. Hold on just a moment. I don't want that one. I want this one. Yes, sir. I will call this guy the absolute coldest white man on the planet at that time. I don't know about now, but he was at this time. This is John D. Rockefeller. And as you can see how Rockefeller funded Big Pharma and waged war on natural cures. I got a few things up here. Let me see if I can clean this up because I still need that. So I can't get rid of either one of those. So let me see if I can make it bigger anyway. Let me try something here because no. Here. There you go. Now that's a much better picture. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just hit the highlights on this so y'all can, and you can look this article up. It's in Safari, and if you just type in the title, how Rockefeller funded Big Pharma and waged war on natural cures. And what he did with the help of Andrew Carnegie, there's another way they're pronouncing it, and I don't care. The two robber barons actually hired a guy by the name of Flexner to review all the medical schools around the country with the ideal of standardizing medicine. Okay. Now, they were able to pull this off. And what came out of this is the American Medical Association. All right. And as you can see, their goal was to streamline and homogenize. All the students were learning the same thing, and medicine was all about using patented drugs. At the same time he's doing the standardizing of modern medicine, he's at the same time creating Big Pharma. And it gets worse, y'all. In fact, what you're seeing here is the robber barons of the early 20th century creating a medical system that will standardize medicine so that they can create profits now of your misfortunes and illnesses. All right. Now, I'm showing y'all this so you can get the entire link. You saw how Bernays used doctors, and I'm going to show you another one later on in the show, how they use doctors to dupe people out of their natural process, because that's the whole point of the American Medical Society. They shut down all the homeopathic cures and teachings and practitioners. They shut all that down. Your natural ancestral cures that were passed down from great grandma, they shut all that down. They convinced everybody that rather than use a natural cure, that you need to go get this pill from Big Pharma because it works better. It was all propaganda. That's what I'm trying to show you guys. It was all propaganda. Again, you can look this article up. It's real. You'll find the information on it. You saw how I found it. Okay. Just Google how Rockefeller funded Big Pharma and waged war on natural cures. This is information we must understand so we understand the wickedness of the system we live in. And the way this thing was structured was to make profits first and foremost, not to give health care, not to give quality care, but to make profits. All right, I'm going to get out of that one. Let's go back and finish up where I left off on Edward Bernays. And if I forgot to introduce that, this one, give me a moment. And it is How to Control What People Do, Propaganda, and it's an animated book summary that was done by, I hope I pronounced the name correctly, Eudaimonia. I hope I did, but that's who did this piece. So we don't have that much more to go. Let's go ahead and wrap this up, and then I will bring you back to Professor Lustig, and he will farther break down, and we'll tie all this together with a couple of more pieces, and then you should be clear on how they're playing us, okay?
The propagandist knows that a large number of people will follow the advice of their doctor due to the psychological relationship between a person and their doctor. A doctor signifies health, which in turn signifies long life. Bernays used these exact methods of leader influence to convince the public that bacon and eggs were the true all-American breakfast. Bernays sold more bacon, not by telling Americans that bacon is tasty, but by asking doctors the question, is it more healthy to eat a hearty breakfast or a skimpy breakfast? His advertisement.
Look, y'all, the winner here was the pork industry. Prior to this time, people were not eating bacon every day. Okay?
Then said, 9 out of 10 doctors recommend a hearty breakfast like this one, with a photo of bacon and eggs. An old advertiser would try to persuade an individual to buy an item immediately. For example, buy this piano, now! Using reiteration and emphasis directed upon the individual, the advertiser tries to break down sales resistance. A new advertiser would, instead of directly penetrating sales resistance, try to remove it by creating circumstances that will swing emotional currents that will build purchaser demand. For example, a new advertiser, when selling a piano, would try to develop acceptance of the idea of a music room in the house, perhaps by arranging an exhibition of music rooms by well-known designers, inviting key people of influence with regards to buying habits, i.e. famous musicians. The music room will be accepted, and people with a music room will naturally think of buying a piano, believing it comes as their own idea. Instead of saying to the purchaser, please buy a piano, they have caused the purchaser to say, please sell me a piano. All these methods and techniques were used for Bernays' most extreme propaganda campaign, the overthrow of the Guatemalan government. The government had introduced labour laws that allowed workers to strike if their demand for higher wages were not met. The United Fruit Company had been the largest landowner and employer in Guatemala for several years, and these laws would affect their profits. Edward Bernays was hired by the United Fruit Company to persuade Americans that the then Guatemalan president, Jacobo Arbenz, was a communist, when in reality he was a liberal capitalist. Bernays ran an intensive campaign of misinformation to portray the company as the victim of the government for several years, including taking American journalists to Guatemala and arranging for them to interview only those who opposed Arbenz. Bernays' involvement led to US President Eisenhower to intervene, and ultimately Arbenz was overthrown in a US-sponsored coup designed to make the world safe for large US corporations.
Amazing, wouldn't you say, guys? I mean, just amazing how this man was able to do all this just by telling y'all non-truths. That's pretty much what he did. He told you non-truths and got you to bite. And believe it or not, this has been an ongoing thing in our society for some time. Public relation is a standard in corporate America. a standard. That means they're not being truthful. Okay? Now, another point I want to bring up before I get back to the hacking of American Mind with Robert Lustig. For everyone who has had cancer, including myself, you need to know that Rockefeller also created the American Cancer Society. It was created for profit. We're talking early 20th century here. Like 1913, 1914, 1915. American Cancer Society. Y'all figure it out from here. We're going to go back to to Robert Lustig and finish up the hacking of the American mind, because there's a lot of great information that he's telling you, and you're going to hear him say some of the same things you've already heard from Bernays, for one, and it's dealing with how to get doctors to approve crap that's killing us. So let's go back and pick it up real quick. I do apologize. I had to jump around, but I'm trying to make these points as they're rolling through so that you guys can kind of follow the bouncing ball, if you might say. Let's go ahead and pick it up from here.
Corporations of America today have engaged in a very specific attempt to market their propaganda in order to get us to do different things than we might otherwise have done. Examples. The easiest one, of course, is food, and the one that I've written about previously. The idea that foods can be healthy goes back a long way. In fact, not eating food is not healthy. It's called starvation. The question is, which foods are the ones
chocolate is
delicious.
So you're Nestle in the 1970s. You're the inventor of baby formula.
Touted. In fact, we have the data that demonstrates that they knew what they were doing. When we went low fat in the 1970s, the Sugar Association knew what it was doing. In fact, there is a now paper trail of the communications between the Sugar Association and two Harvard School of Public Health scientists to specifically exonerate sugar and finger saturated fat as the culprit for our cardiovascular disease debacle. Turns out, we now have the data to show that that was completely untrue, that we have actually experienced an increase in obesity, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, lipid problems, cancer, and dementia because of our processed food diet, which we were told was healthy. And they knew back in the 1970s that that was not the case.
Brainwashing.
That's black hat hacking. Our minds have been hacked to believe certain things that are not true.
Brainwashing. He's just not using the term.
Plot.
He's saying hacking instead of brainwashing. It is what it is.
Because we do not have data that says that different corporations colluded with each other to specifically defraud the American public and to inflict malice upon the American public. But we do have the data to show that individual companies engaged in their own plots to do so. Another example, of course, was tobacco. Tobacco made it very clear for many years that there was no relation between nicotine and addiction, except that they had the data that said otherwise. And they lied to Congress very specifically. So tobacco, alcohol, food, guns, energy. These are all hedonic substances and or behaviors, and they have costs. And we're paying those costs now. We're paying it in terms of our addiction crisis. We're paying it in terms of our opioid, our depression crisis. We're paying it in terms of lives lost, and we're paying it in terms of our healthcare debacle.
Listen.
And you can't reverse it until you understand it. You can't pull yourself out of the ditch until you figure out how you drove into it.
So Rob, in your book, you talk a lot about the difference between pleasure and happiness. In just a few sentences, can you tell us what is the major distinction between the two?
So from a social standpoint, pleasure is the feeling that this feels good, I want more. Happiness or contentment is the feeling of this feels good, I don't want or need anymore. They're not the same. In fact, pleasure begets more pleasure. This is what the casinos are counting on. On the other hand, I don't want or need anymore says, you know, what if there was something to purchase, I don't need to purchase it. In fact, all of the things that say this feels good, I don't want or need anymore, are things that you can't buy. They're not for sale. They are, however, accessible to every single human being on the planet. They're all the things your mother told you, but you forgot. I call them the 4 C's. First one, connect. So interpersonal connection turns out to be extraordinarily important for happiness. And the reason is because face-to-face, eye-to-eye connection generates something called empathy. Empathy activates a specific set of neurons in your brain which have been termed mirror neurons, so that the feelings of the person you're talking to ultimately become adopted by you as well. And in that process, you generate contentment. So interpersonal connection is extraordinarily important. This is one of the reasons why we have religion, is for that interpersonal connection. Turns out the faith is not important. The interpersonal connection is. But then you have to ask the question, well, what about non-interpersonal connection? Like, for instance, Facebook. Turns out Facebook actually sows unhappiness, in part because there's no interpersonal connection. There's no serotonin rise. There's a dopamine rise every time a message flashes across your screen. It's called variable reward, and it actually causes you to increase your actions to access more Facebook. And that actually drives further depression, and the data now show that this is a vicious cycle. Second one, contribute. And contributing means not to your bank book, means to outside of yourself. So you can do it within your work by making the work a better place for your colleagues, or you can do it outside of your work by volunteerism or philanthropy. So there are a lot of different ways to accomplish contribute, but ultimately it has to be outside yourself. Third one,
join an organization.
So in order to reduce stress, thereby improving your serotonin receptors to allow for better feelings of happiness, there are 3 things. 1, sleep, something we're getting much less of, in part because of our screens. In fact, my colleague Christine Madsen at UC Berkeley showed that 8th graders who slept with their cell phone in their room got 28 minutes less sleep each night than those who charged their cell phones outside the room. A recent study showed that if the cell phone is sitting on the desk, even if it's off, it takes 3 times as long to accomplish the task as if the cell phone is not there. By being a distraction, and from the blue light emanating from the screen and actually activating that part of your brain that keeps you awake. Cell phones and other screens, which now have dominated our lives, have actually promoted unhappiness. Second thing within COPE, mindfulness. We know a lot about mindfulness. We study it along with other people at the Osher Center here at UCSF. In fact, multitasking is probably the single biggest destroyer of happiness that we have. People pride themselves on their being able to multitask. Companies look for the people who can multitask the best. Turns out only about 2.5% of the population can actually do two things at once. Everybody else, it's smoke and mirrors. And the more things you take on, the quicker you get unhappy and the lower your serotonin goes. And finally, within COPE, the last one is exercise. It turns out exercise will tamp down dopamine and increase serotonin on its own. And when you use exercise as a mitigator of stress, you can clearly advance your serotonin in a very positive way. And then lastly, the fourth C, cook for yourself. When you go out to a fast food restaurant, you don't know what you're eating. And it turns out there are 3 items in your diet that matter in terms of the serotonin-dopamine connection. First one, tryptophan. Tryptophan is the amino acid that is the building block to make serotonin. Happens to be the rarest amino acid in our diet. It's mostly found in fish and flax. We don't eat a lot of fish in general. It's probably low on our list, in part because of shipping processes, farmed fish versus wild fish, etc. But the bottom line is, fish have a very high level of tryptophan. Omega-3 fatty acids, those are found also in fish, and they are found in certain foodstuffs that are grown, mostly algae. Things that eat algae ultimately increase your omega-3s. So fish eat algae, we eat the fish. Why are omega-3s important? Because they provide stability to neuronal membranes, so it's less likely that neurons will die. And they can be compressed easier. They allow for neurons to come back to shape so that you don't kill off the neurons that ultimately drive happiness. And then lastly, the negative one, fructose, sugar, the one that actually drives dopamine up, also drives serotonin down. So, high tryptophan, high omega-3 fatty acids, low fructose. That's called real food. When you cook for yourself, that's what you're making, that's what you're eating. And you're cooking for yourself and your family. You get the interpersonal connection, you get the contribution to something outside yourself. It's basically a win-win-win. On the other hand, fast food, you're eating alone, you're eating things you don't know what's in it, and you're eating a hell of a lot of sugar because every item at the fast food restaurant has been spiked with added sugar, specifically for their purposes, not for yours. So we have moved on to a fast food consumption society. And in the process, we have actually impeded our ability to get happy. And we have to understand these problems in order to unravel them.
I'm going to wrap that right there. Hopefully you guys are connecting the dots now, man. I mean, you're beginning to see the game that they put over on us, and it's all been done through propaganda for the most part, brainwashing, controlling the information. You control the thoughts, you control the people. It's that simple, and most people don't want to come to this reality that this has happened in our country. That's why I'm laying this out. I'm laying it out so that you can see it coming, you can understand it. Now we can figure out a way to combat it. And that's what it's really all about. is getting information out to our community so that we understand these things. It is time for us to really understand the world that we are living in. And that's what I'm trying to expose for you. Now, we're going to take a look at one more thing here, because this is a case study about how they use doctors. Now, already I have shown you that the American Medical Association was created by capitalists to capitalize on your misfortune and pain, illness, death. It was created by John Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie, and the purpose of them creating it was to standardize medicine. You standardize medicine, now you have a way of charging for it. Okay? Now, the hope it was that by doing this, this would improve our society, and to a degree it has. Okay? To a degree it has. Where it has failed miserably is that our healthcare system has nothing to do with real healthcare. It's not preventative in any shape, form, or fashion. Okay? Guys, do I have to remind you to look back at 2020 and 2021 and how these folks handled the pandemic? The one thing I wanted to point it out before I moved on and show this last piece for you guys is that Lustig said your way to healing or get better or to become happy, serotonin, happy, not dopamines, pleasures, was to connect. That means face-to-face interaction, guys. You know, talking to someone on the phone rather than hitting them up on the text or social media. Contribute. Contribute is getting you back into those group dynamics, because if you find a group you feel you fit into and you enjoy working with that group, chances are you're going to contribute more of your time and energy to that particular group. So it really depends on get in where you fit in, but contribute. Do something. Cope. Coping is one thing our society has totally lost control of. And I found myself to be guilty as well. We have totally lost control of coping. I remember my mother used to tell me before I opened my mouth when I was mad. Before I opened my mouth when I was mad, she told me to count to 10. And she said, by the time you get to 10, you'll be calm enough to say something intelligent and not hurtful. Think about that. And then exercise. I mean, we all need to exercise, and we all know that exercise is a part of what the fountain of youth really is. You can look at older men, older women that has exercised their entire lives, and you can tell they look nowhere near their real age. So we know that's the real fountain of youth. If you really want to find it, you get into a nice exercise regimen and keep your body toned, your body fat low, and those type of things. Cook for yourself. That's the other part of that process of exercise. Doesn't do any good for you to exercise and go out and eat a Big Mac and a Diet Coke. Don't do you no good at all. So I thought that was really good information coming from Lustig, because it's information that makes sense and it's holistic, it's natural. These are things you can do on your own without having to pay a psychologist or a psychiatrist money to point you in that direction. So, but this next study is going to tie this whole thing. This next thing I'm going to show you is called Nestle, the most evil business in the world. It was produced on 10/25/2021 by Jake Tran. The video itself, and unfortunately, I really don't want to chop it up and to give the creator credit for what he did. It's a fascinating piece all the way through. So I'm going to go ahead and take this as far as I can. But you will get so much information. Now, you have to understand that Nestle is the biggest food company in the world. 60% of their products are not what they consider healthy. Okay? But it's the biggest food company in the world. So, without further ado, let's jump into this. I'm already hour and 13, but we're about ready to wrap it up. Another 15 minutes and we're out of here. So, let me go ahead and get this up for you. And I tell you what, I'll skip it through and make it a little quicker for you guys. How's that? But it's a piece you're going to enjoy, man, because it really gives forth some information about how crooked our corporations are and how they work with the medical industry to deceive the public, especially this first piece here. Now, y'all know that America and Western Europe are one of the few countries on the entire planet that feed their children milk from something other than a woman's breast. And this whole trend started in the 50s with Nestle and the product you see on the screen behind me. So with that, you got to put this stuff together, man. If they can use propaganda to get women to buy milk for their babies instead of using the God-given free milk from their own breast, I mean, that's a hell of a psych job, y'all. Well, see for yourself. Let's get there. Go.
A life-saving creation for babies who, for whatever reason, can't breastfeed from their mothers. But just helping moms who can't breastfeed isn't enough. It's such a small segment of the population. It's such a small customer base. How are you ever gonna make a fortune with that? Never! So you're looking to expand your formula business even more. Instead of just selling to moms who can't breastfeed, what if you could sell to every mother? If you could do that, your customer base would instantly increase by 20 to 100x. The problem is you've got some steep competition. Mother Nature's milk. Something that is vastly superior and has far more nutritional value for infants, compared to the glorified powdered cow's milk mixed with sugar that you're selling. So you need a way to fool the general public. To dupe the
general public
into thinking that formula is far better than natural breast milk. Now you may be saying to yourself, but Jake, if we did that, wouldn't we be intentionally making babies malnutritioned? Well, yes. So anyways, you need to convince the world that formula milk is 1,000,000 times better than breast milk, which means you need a little bit of propaganda. Paying doctors to peddle your formula. And the Nestle campaign that was concocted would turn into one of the greatest medical scandals of the 20th century from the biggest food company in the world.
Ever notice when you're making up some quick, you stir until it's rich and thick? You hate to take that first little sip, cause you know it'll be gone in a zip. It's so rich and thick and chocolate that you can't drink it slow. If it's quick, no dolio. That's the saddest sound I know.
Businesses like Nestle have a credit rating or a credit score just like you and I do. The better your credit score, the easier your life is. You can rent a place to live easier, you can get a lower interest rate so you're paying less when you buy a house or a car, etc. The problem is traditionally...
Hold on, that's actually a commercial they got built into the film. Let me get past that and get back to the real deal here. Just give me a moment. There we go.
You know, this night work's kind of rough, isn't it? That's right. But a camo's always a pleasure.
To understand how we're gonna run our propaganda campaign for baby formula, instead of starting from scratch, all we gotta do is take a lesson from some of history's foremost experts at molding public opinion: cigarette companies.
In a cigarette, it's the tobacco that counts, and Lucky Strike means fine tobacco.
See, contrary to the symbol of death and disease it is today, once upon a time in the early 1900s, cigarettes were a cultural icon of sophistication, glamour, and sexual allure, a highly prized commodity for 1 out of every 2 Americans. And how did cigarette companies achieve the symbol of sophistication? With things like full-color magazine ads with respectable-looking doctors in white coats, puffing away with slogans like "More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarettes." An early example of an influencer campaign. Why? Because who do people look up to when it comes to what they consume? Doctors. Who do people look up to determine what's cool? Celebrities. We know with mathematical certainty that large numbers of people will follow the advice of their doctors because we understand the psychological dependence men have on their physicians. So if our goal is to get mothers to choose baby formula over their own breast milk, all we gotta do is to get their doctors to tell them to. So you start Nestle's 1970s influencer campaign to basically get doctors to say, formula good, breast milk bad. You pay doctors and nurses to suggest your formula as an alternative to breast milk? And in places like Asia and Africa, you even hire saleswomen, dress them up like nurses, and get them to hand out free samples and medical advice. And you make sure that these free samples are just big enough that by the time they run out, these mothers would have stopped making breast milk naturally, cementing a profitable, loyal customer. Who cares if Africa, one of your biggest markets, has polluted water? Who cares if most of the moms using your formula don't know that they need to boil the water first to prevent the bacteria in the water from making their baby sick? Who cares if it's estimated that babies who are fed formula in unhygienic conditions are between 6 to 25 times more likely to die of diarrhea and 4 times more likely to die from pneumonia compared to breastfed babies? But that's not your fault, obviously. You print the instructions on the package and they're responsible for reading them, even if they're illiterate. But then you run into a problem. Powdered cow's milk, sugar, and vegetable oil are even close to real breast milk. It contains none of the stuff that can help babies fight off diseases or build natural immunity. It doesn't even contain enough nutrients to keep a baby healthy. And in 1978, Nestle executives were even brought before the US Senate to explain why all these babies were dying or getting sick because of their formula milk.
Would you agree with me that your product should not be used where there is impure water? Yes or no?
We give all the instructions.
Just answer. What is your position?
Of course not, but we cannot cope with that.
Well, as I understand what you say is where there's impure water, it should not be used.
Yes.
Where the people are so poor that they're not going to realistically be able to continue to purchase that, and which is going to mean that they're going to dilute it to a point, which is going to endanger the health, that it should not be used.
Yes.
All right, now then my final question is what do you do, or what do you feel is your corporate responsibility to find out the extent of the use of your product in those circumstances in the developing part of the world? Do you feel that you have any responsibility?
We can't have that responsibility, sir. May I make a reference to...
You can't have that responsibility?
No.
So by 1981, the World Health Organization set new regulations where you can no longer compare breast milk with formula alternatives. That is a problem. A problem that can be solved by moving your marketing to somewhere with fewer restrictions, like Southeast Asia and the Pacific, where formula sales are skyrocketing, while acting like you are breast milk's biggest fan in the US and Europe, even creating a cringy baby band to get your point across.
This is a breastfeeding song.
And even after millions of people start boycotting your products, and stricter laws are put in place to stop you from tricking people into using your formula, there are still reports of Nestle paying their doctors to promote their products, giving out free samples and advertising in hospitals. To this day.
I would almost argue you should never give your child any formula that you haven't run by your pediatrician.
Formula milk has around a 23% profit margin, meaning companies like Nestle make around 23 cents for every dollar in sales. And by 2026, this industry is set to be worth more than $110 billion. But if you thought Nestle stopped there, oh, you're so sadly mistaken. is the #1 thing humans need to survive? Aside from food, it's water. That's why the water business can be very lucrative if done right. See, tap water itself, the stuff that comes out of your sink, is pretty inexpensive. But bottle up that tap water, market it as coming from Clear Mountain Springs or Majestic Fountains, and you have a ridiculous markup. You can buy a tank of tap water for $10, use it to fill thousands of plastic bottles, and then resell that tap water for $50,000.
The same water costs $50,000.
And this is not an exaggeration, by the way. Nestle literally sold bottled tap water with one of their recent lawsuits dating back to as early as 2012. But just like baby formula, you can only get away with so much in first world countries. It's third world countries where you can really take it to an extreme. In Pakistan in 2013, it was revealed that Nestle was diverting clean drinking water away from villages and towns and then packaging it in their factories. They would then resell that water back to the same people they took it from. Honestly, it's pretty genius if you ask me. The people in these towns were forced to drink dirty, polluted water because Here is what the chairman of Nestle had to say about whether or not everyone should have access to water.
Die eine Anschauung, extrem würde ich sagen, wird von einigen von den NGOs vertreten, die darauf pochen, dass Wasser zu einem öffentlichen Recht erklärt wird. Das heißt, als Mensch sollten sie einfach Recht haben, um Wasser zu haben. Das ist die eine Extremlösung.
A decade later, he clarifies his position.
I've always supported the human right to water. Everyone should have enough clean, safe water to meet their fundamental daily needs.
But if you thought Nestle stopped there, you are still sadly mistaken.
Dad says he can pick his favorite chocolate blindfolded. Was it that one? Nope. Try this one. Yes, that's it. No mistaking it. That's Nestle's chocolate. The smoothest, creamiest chocolate of them all. Try the blindfold test. Prove Nestle's best. N-E-S-T-L-E-S. Nestle's one of Mary's chocolate.
Nestle baby formula? Bad. Nestle bottled water? Bad. But at least your candy is okay, right? I mean, what could be more innocent than a Kit Kat? Wrong again. 3 million tons of chocolate is eaten every year. But have you ever wondered where those coca crops come from? Well, a good chunk of it is grown in Africa, including the ones used by Nestle, which can involve a lot of child slavery and forced labor. Chocolate is one of the products Nestle is most famous for. Kit Kat Bar 1 and the Milky Bar are all Nestle chocolate bars. And let's face it, coca is expensive. You have to bring it all the way from Africa, which is already eating into your profits. So what do? You tap into the cheap labor market. More specifically, you start buying coca beans from farms that use forced child labor to harvest the beans. And it was all going according to plan until the year 2000, when a report came out that Nestle, Cadbury, and Mars were all guilty of buying blood coca, and that they knew about it all along. Nestle promised to free its chocolate candy from slave labor by 2005. It missed that deadline. And all the deadlines after that. The excuse? Quote, the use of child labor in our coca supply chain goes against everything we stand for, end quote, says Nestle Executive Vice President of Operations Jose Lopez. Quote, no company sourcing coca from the Ivory Coast can guarantee that it doesn't happen, but we can say that tackling child labor is a top priority for the company, end quote. The masses. You collected all the coca you can find from farms that don't use child labor and made Kit Kat. You slap a fair trade label on it, and it becomes a symbol of a reformed, caring Nestle. All the while, you still continue using dirty coca for all your other candy. And when trends change from being morally correct to being environmentally correct, you switch to a much cheaper alternative. An environmentally friendly label that takes less effort, money, and resources, and diverts attention away from your shady supply chain. But if you thought Nestle stopped there, you are yet again sadly mistaken.
I see automation displaces labor in your organization too, Dr. Sloan.
Ah, Captain Q. Join me in a glass of delicious chocolate quick, won't you?
Thank you, Doctor. I could use some energy. Incidentally, one of those torpedoes you fired at me was circling and you're sunk.
Toodaloo! Captain Q!
Some people will do anything to get rich quick. Toodaloo.
Ethiopia is one of the poorest countries in the world, and in 2002 they were in the middle of one of the worst famines in history. What does this have to do with Nestle? Well, in 1986, Nestle bought a German company based in Ethiopia that had been nationalized in the 70s. The Ethiopian government owed Nestle money and offered $1.5 million as compensation. But by 2002, due to a new exchange rate, this amount had become $6 million. As Nestle, you could have written that debt off pretty easily. There were millions of people starving in Ethiopia, and $6 million could have went a long way. It could provide safe drinking water for 1.5 million families, or anti-diarrhea medicine for 750,000 kids. But instead of writing this debt off, you demand your money back, even while you were making a $3.9 billion profit. If people disliked Nestle before, they really hated Nestle now. And by trying to get money back from Ethiopia, you commit what would be known as the greatest public relations blunder of the decade. Nestle eventually backed down due to mounting pressure of boycotts, but the damage to their reputation had been done.
I'm going to go ahead and stop it right there. I think you guys get the general gist of where I'm coming from and how we have been duped and brainwashed and fed propaganda, not only in politics, not only in the food and the advertising that you guys see every day, but also in healthcare, education, every area you look at that touches our lives in this society. There has been propaganda and brainwashing to bring the masses of the people to either one conclusion or another. And again, we're talking about, if you look at the reality of where we are here in America, you could see how divided America is. And this is because of these different belief systems that people are getting into, plus all of the beat down mentally that we have gone through, especially over the last couple of years with dealing with the pandemic. There's been a lot. I mean, society's out of control. I mean, people are doing all kind of crazy things, trying to find some way to deal or cope with all the things that are going on in our society. So I'm going to try to give you a quick recap, but the biggest part of that is that you can now see the connection in how they trick you to believe. I mean, come on, man. In the 50s, they tricked women to give up using their natural breast milk in order to buy formula. I mean, that's crazy. That's the kind of brainwashing we go through. And what Dr. Lustig was very clear about was how the misinformation in the food supply and how they purposely redirected this propaganda or directed this propaganda to us to get us to buy into the food supply the way it is now. Fast foods, artificial foods, high carbs, high fat. These are the things that's killing us. So as I begin to wrap up this particular series, hopefully you're beginning to put the dots together and you can actually see the brainwashing of America, because it's now completed. It's in place. All right. I have another case study if you don't believe me. And it's one that really didn't get the spotlight it should have gotten when it went down. And I'm going to take it to the next level and show you two things. Because if you're beginning to catch on about the brainwashing in this country, and our coercive persuasion is another term they use, and all that means is feeding you a bunch of propaganda and making sure that propaganda stays in front of you and you begin to believe it. Now, we showed you how that worked with social media, and QAnon. Okay, now I'm going to take you back and show you a case study that was a CIA mind experiment. And at the end of it, over 900 people were dead. And I'm talking about Jonestown. So my next presentation, we will present on Jonestown. I will also present on David McGowan's work, Weird Scenes in Laurel Canyon, because you got to have those two together to see how they tie together. Plus, it was all happening within the same time frame. I think this period of Laurel Canyon happened from the early 60s into the 70s, and of course, Jonestown happened in 1978. So you'll see a closer connection as to what the CIA did to destabilize society and hopefully break up the anti-war and the black liberation movement at the same time. So that's what I will get with you on my next presentation. So look forward to that. Other than that, please don't forget, any donations you give to this particular website at www.therightauthority.com or patreon.com at The Right Authority. At either one of those sites, any donations you leave, I support 4 organizations. I support the Malcolm X Memorial Foundation. I support the Kansas City chapter of the Black United Front. I support blackpowermedia.org. Also, you can find it on YouTube. And I support the Veterans for Black Panthers that are incarcerated or not doing well. I support their page too. So any donations coming in to me will be passed over to those organizations. Keep in mind, it's time to wake up. Had a great interview with the Kansas City chapter of the Revolutionary Black Panther Party. You can find that on my website as well, therightauthority.com. Check that interview out. I suggest you sit down with your youth to hear that interview. There's some powerful information there. With that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up for the evening. Peace and blessings. I'm out of here. Everybody have a good night. I'll see you in about a week.